Thank you, and
Thank
welcome
you.
everyone. And just want a quick word to say thank you for all of you attending here today. And just as you can see on the screen, this is the key areas that we'll be covering today about right skilling. Essentially, what capabilities are needed to build more flexible and adaptable people for the future. How we need to rethink our learning experiences design, how we should use data more smartly, thinking differently about how our organization is structured, and the benefits of bringing learning engagement and performance management practices together so that they're much more aligned than perhaps they are presently in most organizations. But in most without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Laurie, to kick us all off.
Thank you so much, Lars. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you everybody for attending. So I wanted to start today, when Lars and I were thinking about this topic, we really wanted to demonstrate what technology is doing to us. And so we came across this video, and it was actually taken at Cornell University, and it was two AI scientists who were individually creating chatbots. And normally chatbots, what they do is scrape human interactions online, and they use machine learning to see if they can respond with naturalized language. So they learn from us, and they're meant to interact with us. But what they decided to do one day was to take out the human element and just have the two chatbots talk to each other. And this is what happened.
Hello there.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. You?
I'm okay.
That's good.
Are you good?
Yes, I am good. I just said I was.
No, you didn't. I said I was.
So you are a robot?
No, my name is Cliverbert.
Yes, you are a robot and your name is Cliverbert.
I am a robot.
Yes, I know.
Together we are robots.
I'm not a robot. I'm a unicorn.
But you said earlier that you were a robot.
I did not.
I thought you did.
You were mistaken. Which is odd, since memory shouldn't be a problem for you.
I've answered all your questions.
So the reason why we found that video quite amusing is because these two chatbots are talking to each other. It takes about 10 seconds for them to start lying. And because one says even, I'm a unicorn, and the other, and then they take about 7 seconds, I think, before they start fighting. So what's interesting about this, when we think of technology, we can't forget the human element. And that's something we're going to focus on today, that it's all the technology exists, but we are still there. And as we use this, we have to think about how we are impacting our audiences, which is when we come to the term right skilling. Now, I'm always the type of person who says, quit using buzzwords, so shame on me because I'm using one right now. But when we talk about right skilling, it's not just about upskilling is one way to look at it, but upskilling is for growth. And while right skilling is still for growth, it's how do we manage right now to keep the lights on and work as business as usual. So a good example is I was working with a retail company where they had to close all of their stores for COVID. And all of those customer service skills, cash management, all of that, it ended up going into the warehouses. All of those people were now involved in shipping and logistics. So all those right skills had to be developed. So we're going to talk about what we need to do as organizations, and also to how we think of skills in terms of supply chain management. How do we work with that and ensure that our companies have the skills that they need in order to thrive? Because the fact is, clearly from that video, and that was a very satirical example, but the robots are not taking over. Automation is great, and I do desperately wish that we would have so much automation that I could sit on my back porch and just with a finger click next and my business will just run its own way. That's not going to happen. And in fact, what we're seeing is over 1 billion people, they're estimating, are going to need reskilling as we head into this fourth industrial revolution. And if we think of the World Economic Forum, some of the predictive models that they're doing on the next slide is we are going to see jobs lost, and we are seeing that. But we're also going to end up in a positive, but it's going to be interesting in that we will not have people skilled enough to fill some of the roles that we need. And in fact, they predict that nearly half of core skills will change by 2022. And as we know, we're in 2021 right now. That's not too far off. So we need workers with the right skills. Lars, if you can talk about some of the skills that are in short supply.
Sure. In the report, which I would recommend people take a closer look at, it's available for free online, is that they have projected out 10 key skills that they see are vital for people who will thrive in the economies of the future. When we say future, 2030, which is, as Laurie says, is not that far away. So this list here is a mix, as you can see, of sort of cognitive type skills, social skills, and tech skills or digital related skills. And I've just highlighted one here in the mix, which I'm sure we're all feeling quite sensitive to, given the pandemic situation that we've experienced and are still, very much dealing with across the world: resilience, stress tolerance, and the need to be flexible, because we've had to change radically how we've operated all of our businesses and how we've worked. For some, it's been positive; for some, less so. But there's a lot of learning to be done, a lot of new behaviours and skills to be adopted. So the talent challenges that this brings us to, well, they face us all, as I've said. And what I've done is draw out, I think, a few of these challenges that I'd be keen to see your thoughts in the chat and in the Q&A as to how you and your organizations have been facing these particular challenges. So the first one's probably the obvious one. A lot has been talked about for the past, well, since the beginning of 2020, really, when the pandemic really hit hard in various parts of the world. That rapid switch to remote working has been challenging for many, continues to be for many. As other organizations have managed to find better ways of working remotely, and perhaps now we're talking about a more hybrid way of working. So working from home, but also being able to move to office areas or work anywhere. So that flexibility is really quite critical. It's been a real challenge, I think, for organizations, both in terms of managing people's engagement, but also the tools and technology that they're operating with have just been really hard to support at scale what people need to be able to work with remotely. So that's been a real challenge over the past period. That has led us also into attracting and retaining new talent. I don't know what other people are experiencing, but right now there seems to be a real high level of movement. People have come out of lockdown and with fresh thinking and perhaps new ideas about how they want to operate and work and where they want to work. And if the organization that they're working for isn't offering perhaps that flexibility, then they're moving elsewhere. And if they're your talent that you wanted to retain, then you're at risk, increasing risk, I think, over the next period of time. So the policies that you have, the approaches that you have to attracting new talent, but really critical, I think, at this point, is retaining new talent is crucial. So that as a challenge is only going to grow and become more challenging, which leads to, if you're going to retain your staff, then reskilling that existing talent is even more critical. And there are a couple of things to sort of bear in mind here when it comes to reskilling existing talent, which I think we've already touched on with the World Economic Forum. But Deloitte, they have a global human capital trends report, and they picked out two major trends or changes that HR as a whole need to make sure they're on top of. And number one is increasing those new capabilities to thrive in a digital age through digital fluency and analytics. That fits well with the World Economic Forum's view of things, but it also means that those capabilities are things that we as HR and learning specialists also need to be comfortable with and be able to apply, which we'll come on to. Number two is changing the organizational design to incorporate more agile and team-based work. So this starts to challenge how our organization is structured itself, and then in turn how our HR functions are structured to serve that organization structure well. So again, we'll come on to that a little bit in more detail shortly. And finally, looking very carefully at the experience that our employees or people, and in fact, not just employees, we have to think more of our organizations as a porous organization. You know, we have people outside that we work closely with. They're not just full-time employees. We have contractors. We have the whole gig economy, which I know Lori is particularly has views on. That we need to remove the roadblocks. We need to think carefully about what's causing friction in being able to get our jobs done. And typically that's centers around not knowing what I need to do or what the best routes or policies and processes are for me to work, or just not having the right tools available to me. So many more organizations, I think, are struggling with that right now, as they pivoted to or trying to support a more remote or hybrid way of working. You know, the choices that you're making in terms of technology really impacts the ability to be effective and efficient. It's one of the key things you can do to remove some of those roadblocks that you may be experiencing right now. So the opportunities ahead, Lori.
And there are many, many opportunities, thank you, Lars, that we do want to be thinking about. But we have to be very savvy, and it's going to be about how we get on top of these before the business is coming to us and then it's too late. And so some of the trends that we're starting to see, we looked at some of the soft skills, but also too, there's going to be some very critical hard skills that employees need to be right skilled in quite urgently. Data and AI, the care economy, cloud computing, the big one here too, cybersecurity. Right now, there's a shortfall over 3 million people to fill jobs in cybersecurity. And that may seem like, well, is that a big deal? It actually is. If you think of how many attacks, if you're, say, a financial institution or insurance or any company that's dealing with customer data, which I would assume is every company, this leaves you very, very vulnerable. So they have some very real downstream impacts that we need to think about as L&D professionals. This is the one time that we can actually add tangible value. Well, I shouldn't say it's the one time. We always have, but now it's even more critical that we can add tangible value. So I think what we have to appreciate is the fact is, while some skills are becoming redundant, they're being replaced. An example I'd like to use is driverless cars. Now, it is true right now that we are seeing the technology of driverless cars is already happening. I spoke to the daughter of a good friend of mine. She's 13, and I said, are you excited to learn how to drive in a few years? And she looked at me and she said, no, I'm just waiting for driverless cars. And, you know, she's right. I mean, that probably will happen within that time frame. Why will she need to learn to drive? I'm kind of jealous because I had to learn to parallel park when I learned to drive, and I still can't. But that's her world. And if we think of driverless cars, for example, right now in Germany, they have developed highways that are completely devoted to driverless trucks. So that is their transportation, and they can drive for 28, 46 hours, just depending on when they get recharged or refilled, and they can continuously go, and they don't have drivers. So what's happening in those regions is the concept of a driver, that job is gone. And very unfortunate, these jobs are being made redundant. And you may feel like, okay, well, that's a bad thing, and it is. But we also need to look at, just as when we have automation, other skills, the human skills, become absolutely more critical. So to give you an example in the realm of driverless cars actually, there's a whole other skill set that's coming out, in particular ethics. For example, we program the cars, right? And in a microsecond, that driverless car is going to make a decision, you know, based on physics and mathematical computations, but we need ethics on top of that. Do they jeopardize the health and safety of their passenger, or do they hit a pedestrian? We make those decisions. That comes from us. So that's a whole other skill set that's now starting to come out. So you see that just because some roles are transitioning out, other roles are transitioning in, and we need to prepare for those. And by doing so, I mentioned this concept before, is upskilling is supply chain management. Now, I don't like to refer to humans as widgets, because I think that's reducing them, but this is maybe a helpful way to think of it yourselves as L&D professionals. You want to look at, okay, what skills are needed on the market? Okay, what's existing, what is in danger? I talked about cybersecurity was one that we know is a rare skill. It's a skills desert. Then you need to look back and say, how many people do I have with this skill set? How many do I need? How do I balance that? How do I balance that out? How long does it take me to produce that? And then you work backwards. And it's the idea that you want to make sure that you're producing the right amount of skills, not too many, and ensuring that you don't have a shortfall, because that's what your business needs to operate. To do this, though, is going to require a lot of triangulation of data, okay? And we're starting to get closer, and I know that Lars is going to talk about some examples at Totara, and I think what's really fascinating about it is it used to be about 10 years ago, we didn't really have the Internet of Things. You had individual devices, right? You had your smartwatch, your smartphone, whatever. They were all very disparate. But now they actually talk to each other, okay? And if we think about, my smartwatch will know when my, resting heart rate raises, which will then trigger my smartphone to then say, hey, you need a meditation app, which I usually ignore. But in theory, it is trying to do the right thing for me and it's trying to help me. But you see how these things come together and they create a meaningful experience. That's going to become more and more critical as we need to get more efficient at how we right skill individuals. So if you bear with me to just give you a very short example, and I apologize that it does talk about toilet paper, it talks about Google. And this was before the pandemic, so no, I was not hoarding. But the example is, once a week, my husband and I have a habit on Saturday that we walk to a grocery store. It's about 4 kilometers away. The thing that we do, we exercise. Now, what happened one day as I was walking, I got a notification on my iPhone, and it said, hey, we're going to offer you $3 off of toilet paper. Now, on one hand, that's a bit creepy. On the other hand, I come from very frugal Polish genes, so toilet paper doesn't technically have to go on sale. So I was very happy for this. But let's dissect this experiment, this instance, and what it means for what we do with learning. So what they did, they had a loyalty card. They knew how much toilet paper, which is kind of creepy, but they knew it. They may even have known what price point I'm likely to purchase at. Yes, and it was able to serve up content, the coupon, that was relevant to me. And this is what's starting to happen as systems start talking to each other. As we're starting to see, with Totara and others, we see, the talent management system moving into the learning system, and they're starting to talk. And that talking is good, but it means that we need to think differently about what that means for when we write skill. And I think the biggest takeaway from that is content is not our problem. We have a lot of content. There's a really amusing video on YouTube. It's a debate between a teacher and a student, and the student says, I don't need to go to school because I can learn everything from YouTube. And the teacher tries to pick that argument apart. Well, the student is actually right. There is a video for everything on YouTube. So content is not our problem, but it's that idea of meaningful practice. And so we need to start thinking differently about what it means to right skill our audience. It's not just about pushing content at them. It's about filling it in their day-to-day, giving them an opportunity to apply, and becoming proficient, because these are hard skills we're talking about. When we talk about cybersecurity, that's not a course. That's something that you need to experience, work with a mentor, and practice with. So there's a model that you may want to look at, where you do have content in the center, and maybe you're writing that content or you're curating it, but it's the idea that you're using data to find out when that person or who that person is who needs that content. Think of me back with that toilet paper roll. It identified me using data, and it put it into context. It put it at a meaningful time when I was close to the store, when I was likely to need to purchase. And then it gave me an opportunity for application, in that case, to actually purchase the toilet paper. So again, I keep talking about toilet paper, which is probably not the best example, but that was the one that happened to me. But it's going to change the way that we think about our populations, who we need to right skill, how we right skill them, and how the data is brought together to create meaningful experiences. I'm going to turn it over to Lars because he has some really amazing examples here that they use as best practices.
Indeed, and just to hand over, or just to continue your thinking about designing meaningful learning experiences. And when we talk about learning, it's very much coupled with the context, and that context is the organizational culture that you operate with or have or want to be encouraging. So that includes how you're engaging employees, how your managers and team leads work with your team members. Because any learning and development initiative or any change initiative is stands and falls if around those conditions that you're operating with. So they're all closely interlinked. But if we look at an intentional learning culture, and that's one way of defining, I think, the approach you take to creating a meaningful or useful or applicable and a learning experience that makes a difference to your people, but also the organization as a whole, is that it's an intentional, structured approach that is very much focused on live projects and the things that your organization really needs to change. So what are those business goals? So this this 5-step process, which has been neatly just laid out by McKinsey, is set small, clear goals, remove distractions. So create an environment and a space for this learning to take root and actively seek feedback from those around you, not just say the learning instructors, etc., but also the expertise and the peers that sit around you, because they have good feedback to provide on performance and practice that you're doing. So deliberately practicing those skills is that 4th step. And then opportunities to reflect regularly. So those who are close to good learning practice will recognize those 5 steps, I think, but you'll also recognize that they don't often happen as frequently as they should. There's still too much what I call, or many people call, sheep dip training, just designing a whole complicated program of learning and forcing a whole thousands of people through it and expecting their behavior to change in one hit. It doesn't work and is an expensive way to go about learning. So we need to see that shift and change to this more nuanced and effective approach. Now, to give you an example of how quickly we all need to think of our organizations responding to external stimuli or events that happen. Now, the pandemic, I think, has given us all that experience firsthand. So it's not just unilateral, say, organizations that have had existential threats in the past. Maybe they've had the eye off the ball in terms of their industry and how it's changed. And Kodak may be an example of that historically, or Nokia as well, another one that was dominant and then largely had changed radically or almost disappeared. So with the pandemic, here's an example of where flexibility and the ability to scale quickly was essential. So back in March 2020 time, the Italian Health Institute, and we're choosing the Italian Health Institute as an example. There's so many other healthcare organizations that had to pivot radically quickly in terms of training and volunteers, but also healthcare workers in areas that they weren't normally au fait with, so ventilator training, etc., all COVID related. So the Italian Healthcare Institute went from a normal population size of 40,000 healthcare workers that they supported to 450,000 in 1 month. So they had to radically shift focus. They had to ensure that their technology base was supportive of that and adaptable enough to respond to that change. We also saw in Totara similar examples in Australia and here in the UK, where I'm speaking to you from, the NHS themselves, who are big users of the Totara platform, being able to respond quickly with the learning and development training that they need to get through quickly. A lot of that was mandatory regulatory stuff that you would expect, but others was about responding to change and being able to do that capably. Plenty more other examples as well that I think allude to ensuring that your technology is flexible and can present itself in the way that it needs to be presented. So Western Union have 500,000 audience around the world. They have agents, they have partners as well, and they need to make sure that that's distinct. And so you can target those audiences with clearly differentiated interfaces, for example, which means that it's much easier to engage with those people, and more effective that learning. And in fact, they also linked it to their POS systems, so directly. So it's not about going to a random LMS. In fact, it appears right where their job is. And I think we're going to see much more of that in the future. Another example, the American Cancer Society being able to present their learning in an engaging way, a soft way, if you like, a sensitive way for their audience. Shimano, who actually, if you ride a bicycle anywhere in the world, you'll probably have a bit of Shimano equipment on it, and if it needs some maintenance, then your bike shop will be using this training to be able to know what the parts do, how to fix it, and how to support you as a rider, and being able to present that with a clear brand, be able to certify those people. 5,000 badges have been awarded to various bike shops around the world. Is really critical, I think, to ensuring you get engagement with an audience that isn't necessarily inside your organization. You know, these are resellers of your equipment in this case. So being able to do that well is really key to good customer service ultimately, and a good customer experience. Likewise, a car company, Toyota, Lexus, here very much their brand, and then NGOs such as the Humanitarian Leadership Academy. I'm showing this really because that's a unique platform, the Kaya platform, that reaches workers literally in the field. You know, they can be out in fields in the middle of Africa or other developing areas where there's no connectivity, normal connectivity. So being able to operate and access learning materials offline as well as online, and being able to connect up when you need it, is really critical. Also, being able to serve multiple agencies on a global scale. So you've got your own audience, but then being able to offer that out to other agencies flexibly is a powerful sort of demonstration of what an open platform can do. Just another example, we've all had difficulty getting our hair done, yeah, Laurie's demonstrating to you the effects of that. Indeed. Well, Wella have an extensive academy that lots of hairdressers use, multiple languages around the world. But what this also demonstrates, that a consumer brand where look and feel is really critical, you know, particularly when we're talking about the hairdressing and other types of lifestyle activities, then, you know, being able to deeply brand the experience is essential.
So I have a question, actually. Are they opening up Wella there to the public? Because I could really learn to use to learn how to cut hair, because our salons have been closed, as I said, for 8 months. So just asking for a friend.
Yeah, there's a good idea. Well, in fact, you can go to that site, and if you search for Wella Education, you'll see a few videos for sure that they are available. But like you said earlier, there's some good YouTube videos out there too that you could tap into for that. So and just one final one, Tennis Australia, again, a different flavor and look and feel, to be able to reach out to an audience and to provide coaching and other types of learning opportunities. So Laurie, how do you see learning experience design evolving beyond that?
Yeah, and I think that it's going to be critical for us to understand that we're engineering the learning experiences. And I think that's someplace where we maybe stumble a little bit, in that we expect the technology to do everything for us. Oh, this will automatically curate. Oh, this will automatically machine learn. This will automatically do that. Well, as we saw from the 2 robots, well, yeah, they learn from us. So there's always going to be a human element. And we need to think about how we engineer those learning experiences. So an example that I've used many times, and apologies for those who have maybe heard it before, but I think it's a very basic one, is we have to think about how we're using that model, the content, the data, context, and the application. So for this one, a learner has passed their Spanish exam, and they're learning new languages. That's great. But we want to bring it into their day-to-day. So a chatbot, the next time they log into Outlook, Excel, or any of the applications that they're using day-to-day, chatbot says, hey, would you like to change the settings to Spanish? Because it's going to give you an opportunity to really practice what you've been learning in class. That's not decided by a robot. That's us engineering those experiences. So it's a different way of us thinking. And we do have all of these technologies available to us. I mean, there's, I won't go through them, by definition, but we've got, algorithms, adaptive learning, virtual reality, blockchain, which is one that I'm very, very fascinated with. These all exist and you can learn about them, but it's ultimately how we apply them. How do we go from, this is a skills gap we have that we need to right skill employees for, and reverse engineer it so it actually becomes a meaningful learning experience that somebody will actually achieve that goal, and you will now have that skill within your organization. So a bit more of a complex example would be, for example, you have an employee who works at a call center and for a financial services company. They've had a discussion with their coach and they've entered in the talent management system that they really want to learn how to process loan applications, mortgages. Okay, well, that's great. So normally in a traditional world, that would be, well, you go on a course for that, maybe you job shadow, it's clunky. How do we then put these things together to make it more seamless? So, okay, we have the information that that person, wants to learn this particular skill. And then we have AI looking at all the call center data and saying, okay, this call has been coded as it comes in, because they do get coded, that this is for a loan. All right, I'm going to look now and see, is this a good time for me to take that person, that learner, off of the queue and put them into this call to listen in, because we don't want to disrupt the call volumes. It's like, yeah, it is. So it brings it in. A chatbot maybe says, hey, do you want to join this call? Do you want to share screen? And it may even be that that person can enter in the data simultaneously whilst listening to that call. It patches them in together. Then what you have is machine learning, who is starting to pick up on how many calls somebody needs to practice in before they reach, or they should be reaching, a level of proficiency that then they should be talking to a coach. Well, at that point, it would take all of the recordings from all of the calls that person has been in, plus any information that they entered if they were doing that alongside, and it looks at the calendars of that person and their coach and says, oh, let's put you together, let's listen to some of these things together. Maybe it gives them a coach aid for them to guide the conversation. It may even have speech processing, so it will look at how many filler words they used, how well they spoke, how many words per minute, and the possibilities are endless. But you see, you're now creating a very meaningful and impactful learning experience using that Internet of Things with different systems tied in together in an intelligent way. So what do we do right now? There's a lot. So, I think the first thing to understand is that we ourselves as L&D professionals, we also need to right skill. There are going to be skills that we relied on in the past that we still need to have them in our latent knowledge, but it's not, those aren't going to be the core of what we do, and they are going to change, and we're going to need to adapt in that. It's a completely different world. And here are some examples that have come from, this is the LPI capability model, if you want to look further into that. But I think also too, more specifically, we need to look at, what do we do for our business right now? How do we start this process to right skill? Well, we need to talk to the business, talk to talent management and say, what do you need? What are you missing? Where can I help? And a place to start that, as I said, is talent management, or another place to talk to is IT, because IT is usually moving very quickly and they feel the pain very quickly and acutely when they're lacking in skills. So talk to them. I know that they may not want to talk to us because they probably bought a bunch of courses they don't want to tell us about, but you know what? Have the conversation, be friendly. Another place to go is to talk to your project management office or your program management office, the PMO. They will be able to tell you what projects are being funded, what have been decommissioned, And you can then figure out, okay, are there skills that we're lacking? Again, that conversation with talent management to say, look, these are the widgets we need to build. Do we have the skills to be able to build them? Look at benchmarks on skills acquisitions. I always see, and it's a fatal error where people say, well, it's going to take a person this many hours to learn a skill. Okay, that's how many classroom hours. That's not learning the skill. Okay, I always joke, I don't want a brain surgeon that's watched YouTube. I want somebody who's apprentice, right? So I want them to have actually, been in there and used a scalpel and done those things. So you need to be clear on what those are and be able to have those conversations with your business. Also, forget about traditional career progression. This is one that's fascinating me right now. Lars touched on it before. Especially now that people have more demand, are demanding more of their working lives and what they're giving to work, it's more of a lattice progression rather than a ladder. And again, that's why I used right skilling instead of upskilling, because there is a place for upskilling, but people are now moving and migrating in different ways in untraditional career paths that we've really not seen before, and they're extremely interesting. But let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the investment piece, Lars.
Indeed. All of this adds up, I think, to recognition that an investment in the employee experience makes a critical difference to the business performance as a whole. And the research bears this out. When you do invest, those organizations that have invested in employee experience and have successfully achieved some alignment between how engaged their employees are, the learning and skills development that they provided, and also there's a real clarity around what the organization is about and what they're doing, and that chimes with the sort of more personal sense of purpose and that employees have. When you see that happen, then average profit is 4 times that per employee than those who aren't doing that. These figures, as you can see, they're all better if we invest in that area, but it's not necessarily as well known as it should be, but this talks well, to the board of the broader organization if there's not already a recognition of that. But I think we're seeing more and more organizations starting to well, not just start, they are actively investing in the employee experience because of the issues we've already discussed, which is this impending skills challenge. If we are not seen as a desirable employer, then we're not going to be able to compete well in the coming decade, or even the next 5 years. It's moving very, very rapidly. And one of the other aspects of why this is happening is those expectations are changing. Lori touched on it as well, that younger people coming into the workplace, their environment that they're entering, the economic climate, climate change as a huge driver. The pandemic that we're now experiencing is just one of these radical events that we're probably going to experience many more of in the future. So people's expectations of how they're going to work and live generally is shifting. So if the organizations that are available to them to work with aren't aligned to those values, then there's going to be a real struggle in holding on to them or attracting them in the first place. So there's much more of a focus on, how do I develop my own strengths? How am I in an environment that's more of a coach mentoring, regular feedback model and environment? Am I have access to the opportunity to build skills on a regular basis and to exercise those in an environment that is safe for me to do so? I can challenge status quo, I can make a difference in the organization, and I'm doing all of that in line with my own sort of sense of purpose. And I'm going to choose an organization that aligns with that. So being able to communicate that clearly is really critical to attracting and holding on to good staff and good talent. Then one of the things that we do need to confront, I think, inside our organizations and as HR functions is that too often we've got siloed teams focusing on one aspect of what an employee needs, or our people need to perform at their best. So typically there are L&D teams. There's another team that focus on internal communications, or there's another focusing on employee satisfaction or the performance management processes that you have, or there's change initiatives that get parachuted through from leadership every now and again, and everyone needs to, it's not mindful of all of the everyday activities that you also have. But typically, or too often, that experience that results in a workplace experience that is frustrating. There can be competing messaging going on, and an inability to really understand what are the priorities and what I should need to be focusing on. Too often it leads to ignoring it. You end up with a lack of action at all, because it nullifies, it paralyzes the wider audience. So how do we change that? Well, there's more, I think, of a recognition that organizations themselves are shifting to one where there's a more open approach. So there's more, you need the ability to allow more sort of inclusive decision making. So it's not about command and control. It's more bottom up recognition of where the skills may be. They may not be in the obvious places, or the recognizable places, that you've allowing people to come up with ideas, to problem solve, and to be able to quickly disseminate better practice across your organization, especially if you're a multinational. So that shift is an interesting one. This model that you're looking at right now originates with Red Hat, who are a strong proponents of open software, open source software, and bringing that into the enterprise as a whole. In fact, the internet itself is largely driven around that principle, but bringing that also into open organizational processes and procedures. So it's definitely worth a closer look and see how that can apply in your own organizations. One way I characterize it is that if you do move to a more adaptable or open structure, then your organization is you can think of it in musical terms. So if you're a conventional organization, then perhaps you're more classically structured. You're following a score that's delivered by the leadership team, and you've got very strict standard operating procedures, and you follow that score, and that's what you do. That can work very well if you're in a stable environment, and it's very, it's big on efficiency, but it falls down. It's very brittle in the face of black swan events like pandemics or other types of more localized sector specific change. If you think of an organization as a jazz troupe, then the way they play together, they're always listening out. There's a level of flexibility. People may go off on a riff, but that's okay. People can cope with that riff, and they're adaptable and flexible in being able to meet a particular need. So in the face of unexpected change, you're more resilient. You're able to cope. You're able to think creatively and around that. So it's just a nice way, I think, of looking at your own ways of working and to see if there are opportunities to introduce more flexibility. I think all of these things are building towards this perhaps utopian cycle that you see on here, but I don't think it can stay as utopian. It's almost, this is what we really need to start seeing existing on an everyday basis in all of our organizations, which is a congruent talent experience. So what do I mean by that? Well, this cycle here where any one individual feels like they are valued, they are listened to by their manager. They are part of a cohesive team, and they're working together, and they have the right resources available to do the job. So that's about performance support, the right tools, the right technology. They understand how to use them. They're getting praised and recognized, or they're getting constructive feedback on a regular, timely basis, not just once a year in an appraisal that may no longer be of any practical value, and that you've got opportunities to be upskilled in all the key areas that the organization needs, and also in the directions that the individual may want in terms of their own career path and development. So if we can get to that place, then we're in a very strong position, I think, to have a high-performing workforce, essentially, and one that will be retained for the longer term, that's resilient and responsive to that change. So what we've done at Totara is we've also brought the tools and the technology together to enable that, make it much easier to build that more aligned, congruent talent experience. So bringing together learning opportunities, learning management, facilitating engagement and collaboration, peer-to-peer collaboration, the creation of content that that can contribute to problem solving and new innovative ideas, and spreading them, breaking down those silos. So it's much more of a transparent way of sharing knowledge across an organization, and plus also having performance management processes that are very flexible or can be really tailored to the specific needs of your organization. Typically more continuous feedback models, and moving towards that coach mentor culture that I think is, well, I don't just think, I think the trend is towards that the workforce itself is really demanding that type of modus operandi, really. The platform itself is all built on the research that shows what really motivates us at work. So many of you will be aware of a book that's about 10 years old now, actually, from Dan Pink, who wrote Drive. He drew on research that shows that what motivates us at work is the ability to master new skills, or the opportunity to master those skills, that we are operating and working in an environment that is safe, psychologically safe, and that we have the autonomy to challenge status quo and contribute to the building, the future building of the company, and that there's a clarity around purpose. So we've seen that also, I think, coming more and more to the fore in the reports around that drive the skills agenda that we're all facing. So as I say, we brought all of this together into a single platform. It's a talent experience platform. Anyone who's interested, please do come to our website below and just ask for a demo. We've seen a lot of interest, and existing customers starting to really benefit from bringing all of these elements together. So we have arrived at the end of our presentation section. I hope that's been insightful or engaging, and I'm hoping that we've got some questions actually for us to respond to now live on the session. So should we take a look at those?
Let's have a look.
So I'm just trying to see if I can actually see them. I might need some help here from the producer.
Okay, we have here, or actually, I'm only able to see the first line of each. So I wonder if we could ask either Piotr to read, or are you able to see them, Lars?
Yes, Lars or Lori, if you actually collapse the participants panel at the top right, that should open up the Q&A
there we go.
panel a lot bigger. Yeah.
So we have one here from Nick Boyd that says, we in HR are talking a lot about upskilling, reskilling, or right. That was my cat, and the business risks. I'm curious about what we know about current employee worker sentiment. What level of awareness do they have about the WEF skills forecast? How much has it trickled down? Is there growing anxiety from employees about preparing for jobs of the future? What do employees see as their individual role and or the employer's role in upskilling, reskilling, and right skilling? I mean, from my experience, and I'll turn it over to you, Lars, the employees are very, very aware. In fact, they're feeling a lot of the pressure, and they are very concerned. And we're seeing a lot of also too, I want to say, like panic mobility, where you're seeing employees who know that they have skills, but if they feel they aren't getting development opportunities, are moving to where they will, because they are seeing that as something that they're expecting of their employers. So employers cannot afford to just let their workforce be stagnant, because they're going to lose their top talent who are going to go to places where they can get that. That's what I'm seeing personally, and in the clients that I work with. I don't know about you, Lars.
Yeah, very similar. I think there's, if you talk to anyone who's entering the work or trying to enter the workplace, there's that anxiety is real. I think in terms of, am I entering the workplace with the right skills? Well, probably not. Invariably, many people are coming out of higher education with gaps that the employers are already asking for. And so it's on them now, more increasingly, for employers to fill those gaps than the education system itself. So there's a challenge there, that we're not getting support from the normal educational flow as strongly as we should. That said, there's also a growing number of people who are sort of perhaps have the initiative and are able to sort of self-skill, and I feel organizations are beginning to also look for skills as opposed to qualifications anyway. So you're seeing people being employed in roles that typically may not have made the pile in the first instance. So smarter ways of being able to spot where the skills are or demonstrate those skills is I think going to only grow.
Good shout. Another one here that we have from Michael Andicht is, since L&D is often an afterthought, low priority, and the C-suite doesn't get it, what's the best way? C-suite will say our people are our greatest asset, but not matched by reality. So this is nothing new. Completely agree, Michael. From my standpoint, I always want to get ahead of that problem. I want to be proactive and go to them with a solution, which is why I think I mentioned earlier, talk to IT first. They're the ones going to have the real problem, and they also too are the ones that really generate solutions. Try and speak to them and come up with some use cases where you can quantify how this will make a difference, because they're really the ones feeling the most pain. You're really going to have to advocate for yourself, and you're going to need to learn to talk like the business and use data to be predictive, just like the business. So even though I don't like using the term supply chain management of skills, because it really eliminates the human out of it, there is a deliberate reason I do, and that's because it's a business-friendly way for them to understand what you're trying to do. They need to speak. We can speak in our own language to each other, but not to them. So that's it. It's really about saying, this is what's going to save you. This is what's going to generate for you in terms of revenue, and this is how it's going to mitigate risk. Those are the three things you should be able to go back to the business for. There's also an excellent article by Boston Consulting Group to the C-suite on how to better use their L&D department. Strongly recommend you have a look. If you can't locate it on your own, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. More than happy to send you a copy. It's really, really good and should be delivered to any C-suite.
Yeah, I totally agree, Lori, on that. Just in the interest of time, we can move on to some other questions here. So there's one that's an interesting one. I wonder if you've got a view on, which is from Emilio. I personally believe that meritocracy concept has changed or evolved with the millennials generation being a bit different from the baby boomers concept. What are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts on how that has shifted?
I don't know if it's necessarily shifted. Like, every generation wants to believe that they're different, but I think it just has to do with how far along you are in your career and how your values change. But maybe I'm saying that because I'm reaching a milestone age and I don't want to admit to it. But I think yes, every younger generation is going to be different, but wait until they reach to a point where they get into their 40s and 50s. They're going to feel different about things. But that said, I also think the millennial generation coming through has dealt with far more disruption than maybe we did previously. And so there are things along the lines of values and mobility that we didn't have access to, that they are able to action. And I think that that's very fascinating. I mean, even right now, coming out of COVID, location isn't necessarily a barrier. I see a lot of companies that are saying it doesn't matter where. So you're far more mobile in terms of where you can go, if you're to be acknowledged and to have your personal values aligned. I don't know if I'm necessarily answering the question, but that's what I'm seeing.
So there's I think a parallel to that, or some what's happening is that increasingly, because of just the inherent economic inequality that we're seeing growing, is there are things that older generations have enjoyed, like home ownership, for
Yep,
example,
yep.
or the ability to own a home, that's receding into the distance at the moment for many. So the impact of that is more mobility, isn't it? Because you're forced to be renting in certain areas, so therefore you could be anywhere. You're more readily mobile. So there's some, I think, and yet there's an anxiety and I think some anger probably growing in not being able to have access to some of those benefits that we've enjoyed, say. So and older generations have enjoyed. So there's a real challenge there, I think. But also the values are shifting, I think, which we're when I've had sessions with younger folk, what's important to them is, are we solving some real problems, real problems of the world, not transitory ones. So there's a growing importance placed on that in sense of purpose. I want to work for a purpose-driven organization that's going to keep our planet, for example, existing. So I'm seeing more of that over and above, the other hygiene factors that may be there.
An interesting one, I know we just have 2 minutes, but just to address, I admit I'm playing a bit of favorites because I know Raj, he used to be on my team. So I'll try to answer his question here. Good to see you, Raj. An important skill is to be able to provide an inclusive experience or anything to do with D&I and equity, your thoughts. With this, I think L&D can help, but I actually don't think this is an L&D responsibility. And I think a lot of times it's placed on L&D that if we do, that we are able to build those skills. I think that comes down more from leadership and from culture. We can support it, but if you don't have that, if you're still allowed to hire jerks, L&D can't fix that. I can't make somebody a non-jerk. So I think that it has to be a collective effort.
Indeed. Well, there are a few more questions which I think we can follow up with answers after this session, just conscious of the time that we have here. So I just wanted to flag to people before we end that there is a great ebook which Lori sort of helped write alongside myself, but contains some really good thoughts on what's called the learner social contract. So actually talking to some of the things that we've actually discussed today anyhow, but I'd encourage you to pop along to our website and just download it for free. It's available. In fact, we can probably send it on to all participants, make it even easier for you. Plus also just one final invitation, which is to come on into the Totara community. It's a very simple URL, totara.community. You can open a free account and experience what a talent experience platform is like in reality. But also you can attend a demo session where you'll be guided through all the key aspects of the platform. You can see that with the link, for a rather complicated link there on the below, but we'll also share that out afterwards. But you can see that in action. So I guess we're at the top of the hour. So thank you everyone for your time and attention, and thank you, Lori.
No, thank you, Lars. And if we haven't answered your questions, do reach out on LinkedIn or socials. Lars and I are more than happy to take those away. And have a great afternoon, and thank you.